The difference is if we take out the edge and you have that pink arrow that goes to the origin server, and then right after that, it's then blocked on the browser itself. Yeah. And that's where the problem happens. And cAPI doesn't solve that problem. And that's the reason why you can't really trust 100% that data. And that's why Tier 11 Data Suite is a solution that makes a whole lot more sense. So I think a lot of folks who installed cAPI, and now we're, those are the folks that, Data Suite is a potential solution here, obviously, which we're going to get to in just a second here. But I think with cAPI, you might have a false sense of security because what you think you're seeing isn't actually what you're seeing. And then when you compare it to the source of truth, which we did pre-Data Suite, we're always like, why are these numbers so far off? It's exactly like what you're saying. Even with cAPI installed, you still weren't getting accurate data because there's this large portion. I guess it really depends on how many iOS clickers there are and how many ad blockers and how many, cookie deprecators they're clicking on. The point is there is a certain portion that Meta and Facebook are just never going to capture no matter what, and they're taking a guess at it. And that guess might be wrong, might be right, or it might be somewhere in between, but you still don't know with 100% certainty.
Yeah, and that's the big element really as someone who was doing the media buying. Right. It's like with cAPI, your data was getting better for the platforms to optimize, but you just could not trust anything you were looking at in the platform because, okay, it's good that the actual platform is learning and we're going to get better conversions from that. But if I made human decisions based on something that's incorrect, I then stop that whole process because I might turn off the thing that was bringing all the conversions and generating that data in the first place. Yeah. And then you don't see the effect until a bit later when, if you are looking at your MPIs, you'd see like a drop and you'd have to go turn back on the thing that you turned off. So it's really made, it solves it doesn't solve it. It enhances the optimizations phase, but it doesn't do anything for the reporting phase.
Right.
In Meta.
That's a really good way of saying it. It does enhance optimization to a certain degree. However, for reporting, it's still highly inaccurate because there is a fair amount of guessing that goes along. All right, so maybe let's compare and contrast Tier 11 Data Suite here. Not to turn this into a Tier 11 Data Suite pitch, but this is a pretty remarkable system that we figured out over the course of the last couple of years to solve this very problem. Because visibility into the data is everything. Like I said before, if your goal is to go from 6 million to 12 million in revenue, okay, it's a $6 million gap. How are you going to get there? Is it all new customer acquisition? Is it higher AOVs, higher LTVs? How are you going to do it? Chances are probably a new customer acquisition is a very important part of that. And that's the reason why NCAC, or new customer acquisition cost, is such a vital stat, such a vital goal. Like you as a media buyer, you're looking at that all the time and measuring against it, benchmarking it. But that data, that number has to be as accurate as possible. And if you're relying on in-app, it might be right, might not be right, might be somewhere in between, but you don't have a high degree of confidence in that number. How does Tier 11 Data Suite potentially solve that problem, or at least come close to solving it?
Okay, cool. So this is obviously our current explanation of Data Suite. What I wanted to say is don't get too hung up, like I said before, on the different aspects, the arrows, because when I try to show you how cAPI compares, it might get confusing. But we're just going to look at the data path at the moment. So basically in this, the purple is the path of the data, and the pink is just symbolizing the actual user's journey. Okay, so it's not data. That's something that caught me before. Okay, so same situation. People are on the ad platforms, whatever ad platform. Because we're talking about conversions at API, we will look at Meta today. So let's say someone, again, clicks on that ad from Meta. There's going to be an intermediate step. Okay, so they leave the ad platform. They get a first-party cookie added by the ad platform. They get the click ID added as before. But what happens is they pass through this thing called the edge, which is hosted on the edge server. This is a content display network, okay? Now, what happens here in Tier 11's data suite, this doesn't happen in the other example, this only happens in Tier 11's data suite, is that signal that is on the person leaving is captured. Okay, so it's captured here and it's sent to our data warehouse. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. What then happens is that person continues on to your website that is hosted on the origin server, which is the server hosting their website. Okay, but if we follow the pathway of the data, what is happening? So what is happening is that data is sent to our data warehouse, like I said, and then a couple of things happen. One, it can speak to the actual e-commerce platform. So we're getting data from there, first party as well. And then the second thing is it's going to send that back once it's fingerprinted it, matched those people up. It's going to send that back directly to the ad platforms, and you have far richer data. So what would happen in another situation after this edge step is you would then lose the data. So we're not losing any of the data because we're doing this before the browser ad blockers take the signals out of the data essentially, like happens with the conversion API. So we're getting all the data at this step and it goes into the data warehouse, all gets matched together and then sent back to the platforms directly.
The difference is if we take out the edge and you have that sort of that pink arrow that goes to the origin server, and then right after that, it's then blocked in essence on the browser itself. Yeah. And that's where the problem happens. And cAPI doesn't solve that problem. And that's the reason why you can't really trust 100% that data. And that's why this is a solution that makes a whole lot more sense. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. We've got a video we'll leave for you guys as well. It's now on YouTube that explains this going all the way through. But I think understanding it fundamentally gives people, especially the level of expertise that are on these calls, gives them an understanding of, okay, this is actually something that's fundamentally different than the solution I have in place right now because of this edge server. And the edge server basically captures that user before they actually enter your store. They, as we said a few times here on this show, is that we capture the data of your user when they enter the parking lot as opposed to when they walk through your front door. And that way, we can then pump it back to the data warehouse, which is first-party data, and then we can do whatever we need to do with it there, provided that we're compliant. And this is a 100% compliant solution with all the privacy restrictions in the US as well as internationally.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I've tried to show you what cAPI is doing differently, as you just said, Ralph. So cAPI would be the green. It's coming to the browser, loses the cookies, and that signal's gone. And then your server is sending it back to the ad platforms, but it has no idea who those people are at this point. It's just people who've bought from your website, and Meta has to do the job of matching those people up versus you in this situation having the data. We know who they are because we have the tags coming from the platforms. We just have to wait for those people to buy, and then we can send that back to the platform saying, hey, we've already matched the people up. These are the people that clicked on your ad because we know you have the tag. There you go.
Yeah, makes sense. And I love the green arrows here, by the way. So Cameron did all this. You did all this on your own. I didn't even know you had like these types of skills. Tremendous. No, I mean, that really is in essence the difference between the two. I guess maybe we can show. I mean, this makes sense. We're going to be taking some questions here in just a little bit. There's obviously a lot of Google Ads questions, which we may have to couch those for when John gets back.
Yeah, slip your shoulders for those ones.
Yeah, that might just sort of slip off. But anyway, I know John Moran's dog is chomping at the bit, and John Moran's forehead, I think, is a new one. John Moran's liver, kidney. Anyway, the point is that this is a fundamentally different approach, and the reason why we put this together is because we wrote the integration between the edge, which is by a company called Blotout. They use Cloudflare. Look it up. CDN. It's the largest CDN in the world. There's 7,000 edge servers that they utilize that put their particular script on there. And that platform plus our data warehouse integrated back into Wicked Reports, which is our interface, which is where you read the data, which we're going to hopefully see right here, sort of compare and contrast. That's where the rubber meets the road. because the integration between those three things makes everything different. But the key is capturing the data on the edge before it gets blocked by the browser. And that's the key difference between cAPI. Would you agree?
Yeah, exactly.